welcome to our minisodes on agents with our agent assistant, Alice Hoskyns. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alice.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you, Alice. Would you mind introducing yourselves to our listeners, please?
Of course. So I'm Alice Hoskyns and I work with literary agent Sophie Lambert at C&W Agency, which some listeners might know as Conville and Walsh, as it was previously known, and it's part of the Curtis Brown Group. I joined C&W in January 2022 after a few years working in the theatre, film, TV and education industries, respectively, as a freelancer.
And I'm so excited about these minisodes, and I know they're going to be so helpful to so many of our listeners and probably to us as well. So thank you. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So welcome to Minisode 4. Today we're chatting about another side of the author-agent relationship, and it's a slightly tricky conversation to have because it's all about boundaries and crossing lines. So I'd like to start, Alice, by asking you how much you think the author's well-being is part of the agent's job, or how much is it seen as part of their job as well, I guess.
There's so many conversations going on about this in the industry at the moment. I don't know if you've seen some bookseller articles about it. There's an article in The Guardian as well. I think I think publishing is a really elusive industry that can often be viewed as slightly sort of elitist as well. There's only so much you can find out online about what the process of publishing a book or signing with an agent is. And everything kind of seems to be happening behind the scenes. And I think for debut authors in particular, that can be really unsettling and confusing and stressful. And I think the more knowledge you have about something, the more empowered you are within that industry or that kind of circle. So I think primarily an agent's job has to be to keep an author informed through every step of the process, explaining things that might seem obvious to an agent, but would be hugely enlightening and helpful for an author and therefore empowering. And I think that's the most effective way that an agent can kind of help an author's well-being throughout the process, from writing to selling. It's just constant updates and honest communication. And like you say, not a huge amounts of radio silence. And yeah, I think I think because we're in these very busy offices and everything's going on and everything's happening at kind of lightning speed, you forget that time is moving maybe much more slowly for an author, and that email that they sent on Tuesday really does actually need a reply quite quickly, because it's, yeah, as we say, sent them to a catastrophizing spiral. So I think that is not an impossible thing to do, and I think it kind of just to debunk some of the elusiveness and strangeness of publishing. But I also think another aspect is just making sure that payments reach authors as quickly as they can, and that you chase publishers a lot, and to have that real solid understanding and kind of empathy, I suppose, about the experience of being a freelancer. And I think clear communication around that is vital, to be honest, because it is actually just an author's livelihood. It's not a sort of fun little passion project most of the time. Yeah.
We all share in the highs and lows with our agents, and it's very easy to see how the lines can sometimes get a little bit blurred. Where do you think the line should be drawn between the professional and the personal relationship between agent and author?
I think it's tricky, this one. I think the wonderful thing about that relationship is that it is personal, because books are really personal, and I don't think you can really avoid that truth. And I think in order for a book to really work and for that partnership to really work, you have to chime with each other, and you have to have a great rapport and get on really well. And I don't think there's a way of avoiding this when the subject matter or the process of writing a book are kind of deeply personal things. I do think that it varies a lot from agent to agent, and I think it's kind of about knowing your own boundaries in those situations, and situations that you feel comfortable in. Some agents, they're best friends with their authors, and for some there are much clearer boundaries. So I think there are different formulas that work, but it's, you as an author should never feel pressured into having a really, really personal relationship with your agent if that's not what you want, and that won't define whether or not you are successful, I suppose.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, a lot of us really get on well with our agents. That's why we chose them in the first place and why they chose us, because you've got to have that rapport, haven't you?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's a business relationship, isn't it?
Totally.
It's always a little, yeah.
I try not to email outside of business hours. I mean, there's always the one-off occasion, isn't there? But I try and schedule my emails coming at like 9:06.
No, you've just landed at your desk. You've just got your coffee. That's, well, actually not. But yeah, I think it's difficult to sort of grapple with. But yeah, it's personal. It's a personal relationship, and it's personal to how you would like it to work. But yeah, I know it can be difficult then when you actually do have to ask for something quite directly, or chase a payment, or actually chase the radio silence that's been going on, and that feels uncomfortable. But it's not uncomfortable for us because we're aware that we're working for you. Yeah.
Good on.
And the publishing industry is a very nice industry, I would say. And publishers and agents try very hard to say nice things about sales and books, even when times are very tough. So authors can sometimes feel, I guess, as though they're reading between the lines. So how do agents manage the truth versus managing an author's disappointment?
It's really hard. The market's really tough at the moment. It's we're just experiencing across the board, particularly just with cost of living and everything. People aren't buying hardbacks. If you look at Nielsen, we spend a lot of time looking at BookScan, and it can be really, really depressing. And those are forces beyond our control. And I know that the agents that I work with are finding it really gutting, having to deliver disappointing news over and over again, particularly in the current climate where it just does feel like that's constant. It can be quite draining and quite depressing, because ultimately you want your authors to be happy and to be selling lots of books and to be feeling excited and positive. So I think it's a really, really difficult balancing act. The truth is key, telling the truth and communicating clearly. So I think just being as transparent as possible, providing as much information as possible to an author about the reality of how tough it is at the moment, even if that feels difficult, and like it's not going to make an author very happy, I think is probably the most useful thing to do for both an author and an agent. The great and miserable thing about sales figures is that they speak for themselves, but we have access to those and laying those out. And also, I suppose, alongside bad news, helping an author to get excited about new projects and new possibilities and working with them creatively and thinking ahead, so that they don't completely despair is important. But I agree, it's the same issue, I suppose, as that blurred relationship and all of the niceness, as everyone's very, very lovely in publishing, and there's the email format of the like, if you're doing incredibly well and enjoying the sunshine and blah, blah, blah. Here's this bit of information. It can be difficult, but as with everything, it's a balancing act, I think. How do you find, what would you say?
Just hit the nail on the head there, haven't you, with the emails, with the hope you're having a lovely day kind of thing. Because sometimes if I'm really busy, I'll just send a quick email, be like, oh, is it possible we could just have a look at this? Yeah. And then I'll go back and I'm like, oh God, did that seem rude? Because I didn't add all the fluffy bits as well. It's a real challenge, isn't it? But you want the fluffy bits. We're all expected to have them. We expect them back. It's a weird thing. My husband despairs.
Yes, I mean, having worked in a completely different industry, it was an absolute revelation to me to kind of have kisses on the end of emails and people asking you, how's your day been, or how's your summer, or I'm like, I'm not used to this at all. So
here's my Excel spreadsheet.
Yes. There
was an amazing YouTube video I saw once. It was this writer who was he was sort of from a working class background, and he was talking about how all the sort of people in publishing and agents say super and bravo and wonderful, hurrah. And he said, and you never think you'll end up doing that. He said, but then one day you find yourself saying, hurrah.
Yes, that's so true.
I saw a tweet from someone which was like, is everyone in publishing really always thrilled by what's such an extreme word?
We really are.
But I think it's also, I don't know, I think there are a lot of women in publishing, and I do feel like we feel that need to kind of almost apologise or justify or kind of pad things out in a way that is really lovely. but it's actually sometimes really indirect and unhelpful. So never fear sending that one-line email. It's actually quite refreshing sometimes. I think.
Keep them coming, Lauren.
That's all we've got time for in today's minisode. Thank you so much for answering all our questions, Alice, and join us next week, listeners, where we'll be asking all the other questions that you want to know.